Oh, uh, sorry. What I can do, I think, uh, is zoom in on various parts of the slide. So let me change mode here. And hopefully, and I'll try to pan around and not make people nauseous while I do it. So hopefully this helps. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I started with this first idea on the right of the screen with certain parts and pieces, right? A modern interpretation of a brush arbor to define maybe the space for dialogue and the entry access point to the site. A landing spot before you even enter the dwelling that might be a space for understanding, a small space for prayer, reflection, even before entering, so that you sort of understand the solemnity of what you're about to experience or what the intention is when you do enter. And then we thought to protect that entrance as well, if you have into the site and you know that it's open, the idea is not to condition the space, but certainly to protect it once a restoration is done structurally. And you'll see other elements begin to pop up into this, like the idea that of a skylight that Pam showed in one of her images in her slides. And that idea is bringing in that light from above, which has different meanings for everyone. But I think really does tell a powerful story right there. And so then as we sort of continued sketching and thinking about maybe how to perhaps focus the idea of the space for dialogue towards the entrance, starting to introduce maybe site seating, right? So in this sort of classroom, in this formed space, what that might mean, and then that this landing spot and is more connected to the arbor space. So those kinds of ideas continue to evolve through sketches and drawings and notes. And then this last one, you'll see it's sort of the geometry of the space, again, starting to try and work together with the existing and the new, while trying to sort of introduce maybe more space when you enter into the dwelling. And that in the sketch below, that the form of the skylight starts to become something more than just a hole in the roof, because I think what is there and what is referred to as a skylight is in effect just missing structure, missing flooring, right? And it was an unintended maybe consequence, and it was because it was a shed and it needed some natural light. So let's take that idea and be intentional about it. That's where we start to go with these sketches, and then you'll start to see notes about maybe interpretive panels and things like that. So I'm going to zoom out back to the page level, hopefully without making everybody drunk. And feel free to interrupt me at any point. Okay, so so all of those sort of start to merge into what we'll just call a preferred concept, I think. Just looking at the site plan from above, the landscaping isn't shown, the trees and whatnot. So what you're looking at is the area of the existing structure. And then what we have expanded is to be that space for dialogue and education. And there was the intent of representing in some way the original size of this structure, right? And we thought, well, looking at the 1905 Sanborn map and just using that as a guide and saying, this footprint, this space is what originally might have been here in terms of scale and size. So starting to relate the intent and the desires of those who've given input with how we then articulate it on the site, so that things become less random, right? They have a meaning, they have a purpose, and sometimes multiple meanings and multiple purposes. So that's how we start to look at the elements. one thing I did want to also note is that there's a small gate here from the sidewalk, and that's something I would love to talk more about too. That I guess I always felt each time I visited the space that it would be a different perspective to enter this from not necessarily behind, but from a different point of view, right? We were involved in another project in Loudoun County, Virginia, with the Arcola slave quarters, which is a stone building, and it's really striking. And there are not many stone quarters that still remain. But what was interesting is that when you approach it from what would have been the front, right, from the main house side, it is a one-story stone structure, pair of doors. But when you approach it from the rear, because of the slope of the site, it's a two-story tall, very impressive structure. And it just changes the point of view. It changes just how you think about it, just from the way you approach it. So we want to maybe consider what that might mean, depending on how we approach this structure. Other thing to note on the site plan is we wanted to understand how we might provide like accessibility, full ADA accessibility in this, which is important. And we don't completely understand topography yet, but knowing that there's a slope coming down the hill, if there's a way that we could actually tie into this through the garden at level so that you could enter the structure unimpeded, that would be a wonderful thing that we could hopefully try and achieve on this. So now I've sort of flown up in the air. I'm sort of up over the wall. Just Gray Street is to the left. In front of me is North 23rd. And we're looking at the major components of this intervention. And please treat these as sketches for sure. So starting with just that space for dialogue, what defines maybe the original footprint of the structure. And with Tim's assistance and everybody else's, we'll refine these to be exact, but I think the idea is right? And so a simple tiered wall, right, becomes an amphitheater space, becomes a place to see where you can then engage with each other and engage with the building itself, to focus on it. The existing, I think it's an oak that is right here, right, to give you sort of a point of reference, I think. So maintaining, obviously, the character of the landscape that surrounds this, but certainly making space for, or more space for this structure. And then there are elements like the fireplace inside. And I think we're fairly certain that would have been a double-sided fireplace in the original structure. So that gives us license to think about adding that, and it becomes sort of a center point of this space, right? Because it would have been sort of the center point of the interior of the structure. Lots of mention about water, the meaning of water. There's so many meanings in our histories, current and past. And so as opposed to thinking about this as a fountain, right? We have, you say fountain and sort of get an idea of what that might look like. We thought functionally on this, water would have done many things, right? A simple pump fountain for gathering water, right? Or any number of ways. So let's approach it that way. So while it is almost reminiscent of that, it is meant to have that opportunity to be that point of reflection, right? So it has sort of historical interpretive form and very contemporary meaning in the space, while also being somewhat safe. I think, there are small children that will encounter this space as well. So I'm trying to do a lot of things, but incorporating this so you'd have this sort of small fountain here to to add that component. So the water and the fire. And the third anchor of this would be the entry into the space. Now it's sort of taken on a different form from what you saw before. But going back to, what was this structure physically before? We take a little liberties to say, okay, we know it had a porch on it. And if we sort of extend or add on to the framing to expand the idea of maybe what that porch might have been, not completely reconstruct the porch, but use the form of it. So when you, and I'm gonna go to the next slide to show that, oops, too fast, slow down, So if you imagine if you had the porch and you took the flooring out and you left the roof of the porch on, this very tall, narrow space, for me starts to feel like a small cathedral, right? Or a small sort of chapel space, right? It has that kind of scale and feeling to it. So at a very small moment before entering into the dwelling, right? The depth of the dwelling space, we try to create just an idea of elevated feeling, thinking, and reflection before entering. And then what you see here in the background is the opportunity to then say, this is what this space is, right? Because I think we have to be very clear as to what people are experiencing. And so finding those opportunities that fit naturally within what we're doing. And then next slide, yeah, so if I zoom in on that, for example, and again, this is just a stock image, or not stock image, just another image of a manifest of enslaved folks. And so, using that to maybe articulate who lived here, who were the dwellers in these quarters. I think the passage that Pam cited in her presentation, this is where maybe we would encounter that before entering the space. And then obviously there are other things that we want to do, sort of, just the logistics of, if you think about this as a public cultural space, the idea of being quiet, the respect, and those kinds of things. So those have to happen. I'll call those the functional signage, right? That'll be a part of it too. I don't show it all here, but so it becomes I think a real opportunity to expand and immediately sort of compress into what the dwelling is. And you'll see this sort of form of the roof over it behind. So we know that sort of from Craig's structural report, a lot of work that needs to be done structurally. And so we didn't want to do anything that might make someone think that this is a historic component, right? Including just the form of a new roof. So instead we sort of draw from some ideas about roof forms from other cultures. There's sort of this, again, there are Western African dwellings from Mali region that would have this kind of shape, right? So how do we sort of draw on that? And this is the kind of thing that, you and I, maybe today will know it, but visitors might not look at it and go, oh, I know where that's from. But I think that they will recognize that this isn't an original component of this structure. And where do I go from here? Oh, then I go inside. So there were a lot of comments and ideas and notes. And so on the right was the first sort of sketch specifically about how things might come together on the interior of the space. But I think what I want to do at this point, and mind you, again, this is for reaction and conversation. But there is I think the space where there was a window that would have appeared on the exterior of the wall, on the street side of the wall. And so what we've done is maybe taken that and reopened the portion that is still there and then expanded on it. And instead of skylight per se, it becomes then a light monitor. So it comes from the original form of the structure, but it does something now completely different. So that image that Pam showed, married with the idea of historically what this building was, to create this third thing that creates a whole new sort of dynamic. So that's the goal of all the things that we want to do in this space, while maintaining the repaired floor structure, embracing that you recognize and see the character of the walls as they are, with the furring and the plaster, how they are. Yeah, and just know that this is just my rendering software representation of an aging brick wall. And then from a furnishing standpoint, the dialogue has been about keeping it simple and mobile, right? So we're thinking like in that courtyard space, we might actually create a small storage area, imagine if you will, so that these small writing desks and stools and benches can be easily removed or relocated within the space. And they kind of have a very simple, unadorned form to them. And then once we had this image, then internally we were talking about, if there are also artifacts that we might come across, archaeological work on the site will yield probably a lot of things, might be small things, but some of this could be imagined to be display cases instead of writing desks, So now, we have a language maybe to start to draw on and how we might, again, interpret things inside the space. And I think that's my last slide. And so now I'm going to, are you seeing a 3D image from the garden looking at the structure?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. So this is not, I tell all the folks in my studio, don't use the live model in a meeting because things can go wrong, but I'm gonna risk it. This is, for example, what I was saying, maybe we had the opportunity to create an accessible entrance here, but what I liked about this image was now there's a, dare I say, a new regalness maybe to the structure when you look at it in comparison to the buildings that are historically known as Richmond Hill, just by the addition of forms that were already there that are historically relative, but then by adding elements that we think are representational of lost generational identity. So I guess I'm gonna pause there and just open it up for questions. One thing I am able to move around this model and so we can discuss pieces.
Please, everyone, your comments and questions, feel free to unmute and express yourself or offer feedback to Burt. That's what he's looking for, guidance, thoughts, feelings.
And I'll jump in.
Okay.
Burt, I want to say thank you. The entire time you were speaking, what I sensed was redemption. To honor the people who endured what they experienced on this land. This seems like it's an opportunity to redeem what they have sown into the soil.
Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Any thoughts you're having? Tim, I see you here.
Go ahead, Tim.
No, Tim, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so we spoke a little bit yesterday. One of the things that I like about the more simple form that's kind of cardinally oriented rather than at the angles is that it doesn't distract from the fact that this part of the campus was part of this larger complex, and that the experiences of the people that were living in this dwelling, go way beyond just this little corner. So I think that the visual sorts of things and landscape modifications that would make it appear as though this was some kind of discrete and isolated area, for me and just my interpretations are kind of misleading. Although at the same time, kind of what we talked about is the probable sense of privacy and control and hopefully self-determination that people enslaved here might have felt in this space, as their own, as far as they might have considered it as such. Just one of the things I'd like to, my impression.
And Tim, what you were saying about a possible garden because of the lack of sunlight in that corner, can you say what you were thinking?
Oh, sure. And this is kind of related. So again, with just the understanding that people who were enslaved by the families that owned the property that's now Richmond Hill, that they would have been moving all around this campus and inside and out of the main houses, and of course out on the street, et cetera. That wall wasn't always there. Just like that, I think that things that we can do to kind of tie the landscape together. So for example, Beth and has the great garden over just beyond the labyrinth, great light, et cetera, that you could have interpretive plantings there with markers or guides that would then direct people to the dwelling. And so that way they're experiencing more of the campus and also seeing it as a whole, rather than, oh, there's this one particular artifact that's related to enslavement over here in the corner. Because the goal is enriching the history and understanding of this place and enriching the experiences of visitors and residents at Richmond Hill, not rewriting history, maybe some corrections, and also not just isolating these specific spots as though it's not related to the entire story. So rather than, as we talked about before, possibly trying to have some kind of interpretive plantings around the dwelling where we know it's just not, there's pretty bad light. The soil may be great because it's full of organics and very well draining, but just a way to incorporate that without having to focus everything right here in the northeast corner.
Thank you, Tim. I just want to read some of the things in the chat. Burt, just so I want to make sure you hear these things that people love. So Lindsay says, I love this. Debbie says, I love it. It's better than I expected. Anthony says, I second that. It looks like a great concept. Hyatt says, so creative, beautiful, and honoring. Anthony's telling me to read these comments. So that's good. Thank you, Anthony. Kathy says, this is this wonderful, simple design to offer opportunities to reflect, pray, and discern what we are living into or leaning away from in our lives. I love that, Kathy. Using the past to help us. Lindsay says, I love it too. My favorite part is the window and the creative use of light inside. I also love the fire and water elements. Patrick says, can you unmute and just say everything you're thinking? This is Patrick with Team Henry, the contractor.
I said Burt crushed it. That's amazing. We were talking in our office about the project, and sort of Devon and I were scratching our heads and saying, it's a shed. I mean, I don't know what we're going to be able to do with this thing without sort of major extensive changes to accomplish what your goals were. But this is unbelievable. I think Burt did an amazing job.
Oh, thank you, Patrick. And Patrick, Mike, any initial thoughts from the contracting perspective that you want to, or I know you'll need time to,
So, I mean, obviously, at some point it becomes a budget conversation. Burt, I think from our initial meeting, the goal was, let's sort of design our home run project. If money was no object and we could do whatever, what would we design? And then, then the budget will come into play and fundraising will come into play, and we'll see what we can do. There's nothing about this that I think is sort of stupid expensive. I see, things, lots of times architects throw stuff on paper that you just look at immediately and say, there's no way anybody can afford that. I don't see a lot of that here. I mean, we'll have to look at, as I'm understanding this, the idea is to sort of partially excavate around the site to try to achieve ADA access. Is that right, Bert?
Yeah, that's right. So this path on the right, which is kind of shown at grade, but it would be sort of a partial excavation kind of out, right, until you sort of hit grade and could work with it from there.
But your courtyard, if you will, the seating area, that's all at basically where grade is now.
It's close. It does. I think it rises up.
Okay.
Some, and I don't know if it's a foot or 18 inches or something, but is to come out at a kind of level and excavate a little bit from there, but not too deep.
And so on the inside, there's a fireplace opening on the inside, right? And
yes,
and that we're going to keep, and this opening that's on the outside is totally new, that doesn't exist today, or at least exist in that place today.
Right. It doesn't exist. We think we'd find evidence of it if we did some exploratory excavation in that spot. And then I am proposing there's some sort of wing walls and other bits and pieces that we're removing that I would love to recapture that masonry as much as possible to do this piece.
Yeah.
Thank you, Patrick. Oh, go ahead. Were you finished, Patrick?
Yeah, I think this is great. And, if we can ultimately accomplish anything close to this, I think it's an amazing project.
Thank you, Patrick. Okay, I think we have Beth and Richard, and then Anna, I'm going to ask if you, after they speak, would unmute and say Anna's with the Sacred Reclamation Project with the African Burial Ground. So I'd love for you to weigh in. Beth and then Richard.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, and Allison too is there. Sorry, I just saw the name, Beth.
It's okay. Yeah, no, it's good. Right. We are excited about all these plans as well. And from the stewardship of the earth perceptions that we bring to the table and just thinking about the grounds and around, we are also so curious about items such as the flow. So we heard you touch on it a little bit, but just curious about what is the flow like, or the anticipated flow of people walking in and through? Like, where do you see folks navigating in and out as they are engaging and stimulated by the journey in?
Sure. So I think primarily there's a path that leads to this area of the site that comes, if you're seeing my cursor, from sort of the center. So you would sort of arrive through this opening in this sort of amphitheater-like seating walls. And so in this space, so if you were, I think, a group of people that then wanted to understand what all of this is interpretation, this is this point for you to sort of start that engagement before you even enter the space. And then from there, if you were to enter where this gentleman is standing, let's see if we can, would lead to the stairs that go down and into the dwelling, right?
And Bert, where did he come from? Like, can you do your pointer? Like, how did he approach the?
Oh, sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can. I'm gonna try a thing, and everybody just bear with me. Hide that tree because it's. And then I'm gonna grab him, and then I'm gonna. So he would enter here, right? And then there's a step down into this space here. And then he could move across in and then down the stairs that way. Is that what you were asking?
Thank you. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And
All right.
ADA and people in wheelchairs would take the other route.
You would come along this path and then sort of in. So it'd be a little lower than what it's shown, but that's the idea, that you would come in at grade there. Tim, I picked this because it looks like you from behind, so I'm just sort of dragging Tim all around the site.
Allison, did you and Burt have, I'm sorry, Allison, did you and Beth have other comments?
Yes. Yes.
Good,
Yeah,
continue.
So, sure, this is Beth here. So there is a path existing from the Black Madonna that enters what appears to be where the person is standing currently.
Mm-hmm.
But what I heard you say is creating more of a intentional paved path closer to the wall, where right now you'd have to hop down like the ground is 3 or 4 feet higher than the walking surface inside the dwelling.
Yes.
So creating a second path closer to the wall and coming in. So, just those are some logistical questions we can kind of talk through with what's there.
Right. So I think so. And Patrick, I think, was asking a question. So if you see my pointer where this sort of light tan path is, that's the new path that we're talking about along the wall. And you would have to sort of bring down that piece of wall where it's a 3 or 4 foot drop, right? And so you remove that piece of wall and just imagine, you would be digging straight out from there. At a certain point, you're digging straight out and it would hit the ground where it currently is. So that way you're creating a direct sort of walking path in at the level of the dwelling and not having to navigate the stairs going down. So that would be the intention.
So that path would, would we keep the path that comes from the Black Madonna currently, or like just?
I'd love to hear thoughts. I think for which, historically, as I spin this around, right, what we're looking at would have been the front of the structure, and that certainly makes sense of that path approaching the structure in that way.
Okay.
When we started to create a new axis, right, by creating this fireplace and this light monitor here, and then sort of the symmetry of that space, and then we talked about sort of the church-like or even cathedral-like nature, then the geometry of things seemed to want to be more on this axis of how you started to approach it. So that was our thought.
Okay.
Thank you, Beth. Richard?
Burt, thank you so much. Thanks to everybody. This is truly astounding. A couple of thoughts that occur to me, the things that I want to speak to, that it's just beautiful the way you've captured it. From the entry point coming in, I was struck with images from people leaving Africa. There is a shot of a small portal. I think it's the Gate of Tears or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I
the
think
door of no return. Is that the one? Yeah.
Arriving at this door here, and Burt, you made a comment earlier about there was African life in this structure that was European. It was a European container. And I love the way you have replicated in some ways. Certainly the geometry of the outer geometry is very European, but you've captured the Richmond Hill thing. You've lowered the wall that surrounds this place, but it's interesting that this wall surrounding the gathering area kind of replicates that. But you're forced to focus on these essential things, and I love. What I see there is not a fountain. To me, that is a well. You put the well and
well too. Yeah.
Oh,
wow, Richard put the well.
And there is the well. There is the fire, and this Brush Harbor thing is incredible. And the way you wove that into this entrance where the man is walking in, the spiritual significance of that is astounding. But the best is that, what did you call the symbol? The
it's
one
Mako, M-A-K-O.
Mako. Richmond Hill, the way it is right now, it's subtle, but there are circles all over this place. The circle holds this together. And this is such a radically different circle from the, you know, I don't know. I mean, it harmonizes and echoes, I think, spiritually resonates with the, you know, the roots that we've got. It's just it's an incredible intermingling of roots.
Thank you, Richard. Anna, can you unmute and say your thoughts? If you can, if you can't, no worries. Let's see, what Anna says in here is, let's see, I want to scroll up to her other one. Oh, I thought, oh, she was asking about the symbol. Yeah. So the symbol, I want to give my friend Carrie Lewis credit for this. So we were talking about African symbols and what African, because people wanted a nod to Africa. And so Carrie sent me a link with Andinkra symbols from Ghana, from the Akan people. And so that one, we were thinking of the circle because in the chapel, we have the Eye of God. I didn't know that that's what it was called. And I asked Victoria, what's that called? And she said, oh, it's the Eye of God. So, but Carrie, thank you for that. And the other thanks I want to give is Tim is the one who came up with the brush arbor idea. But then it didn't become a complete brush arbor because some people were sensitive about, you know, that was where people went to hide. That's where people, you know, went to be, you know, to be not under the surveillance of, you know, the powers that be. So I think what Burt created is a really nice blending there. Who else would like to say something? Hyatt, would you like to talk about that story in 2017? I did have Kristen.
Sure.
Kristen recorded a brief piece for me, and so is Laurinette. She's gonna.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Because I feel like my memory's a little bit fuzzy, and I think that Laurinette Lee and Free Egunfemi, who's now Free Bangura, they were in my cohort, as well as Kristen Saki-Blanc, of the Community Trust Building Fellowship in 2017. And our group decided that we wanted to do our closing ceremony. And I think we may have done something else right near that dwelling. And it felt very sacred. And a number of us in the group are pretty intuitive. And we just really felt that was the spot where we wanted to do our closing ceremony. And then the two real historians in the group, we actually went inside the dwelling. I mean, it was in, you know, deteriorating shape, and I don't know what things look like now, but yeah, a lot of greenery outside, a lot of trees and brush and stuff, and then, but there was a clearing right in front of the dwelling, and we one or two at a time at first, and then a few of us were inside, and we did some sacred ceremony inside and outside. And as I was saying, Laurinette Lee and Free Bangura were the real historians, and they both said, we believe this was a slave dwelling and something needs to be done with this. And our whole group just really felt it, and there were a lot of tears, which I'm feeling now. And it was just a beautiful place to do our closing and to be very honoring of, you know, what had happened there, which was, you know, very much related to why many of us were there doing the Community Trust Building Fellowship. So it was a
Hey.
beautiful experience.
Thank you, Hyatt. I have heard so much. I think that's such an important part of the narrative, of this. That's why I asked Kristen to record it and Laurinette to record it, because, it started before all this. Okay, in our final minute, Paula Parker, Dr. Paula Parker, I would love to know what you think. Paula has been a great help and inspiration to me personally on this project. And Paula, what are your thoughts?
The thing that I really like is the fire water, the door of no return kind of allusion to. I am not good with spatial stuff, so I'm not understanding the roof on, not the portico thing, but the other piece. But it kind of reminds me of, there is an African shape. Is that an African roof? Is that what you're alluding to?
Yes, it is. So it's.
Oh, I
it
see.
has. Yeah. Okay. And then you.
Yeah. But I really, yes, I like the place to have and sit outside and be quiet, as well as a space, whatever you do on the inside, it's just to sit there, to just be able to sit in silence, and whatever you put on the walls, the names of whatever is going to be put up, and just be able to reflect, either with a group or by myself. So I think it's very well done. And thank you for turning it around so I could see.
Yeah, that's good to see it from this vantage point. And Burt, one last thing before we close, can you zoom in on where the names are again?
Before you move, is that the same pattern?
Yeah, that's the Mako. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I did use the same pattern. Where the names were. Yep. Let's see. There?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if people like this, that this is how names would be displayed as you enter with the scripture. Anybody? You might just want to sit with it for a while.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was saying I'd be okay with the where. I think it's conceptual now, and there's a long-term discussion on exactly what happens in that space.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thanks, Lacey.
And will the
Others?
names
Lisa?
Will the names be put on plates where you can add to, or will they be inscribed in the structure?
That's a good question.
That's a good question. Yeah. I think we'd want to figure out a way that we can honorably add more names as required.
That's a good point, Lisa. Yeah, thank you for that, putting that in my notes. Okay, well, we are at time. Thank you so much, Burt. How would you, yes, please.
And I'm sorry I put this comment in so late, but I think as we're costing out, we need to think about long-term care and maintenance and try to allow for those costs on the front end if possible.
Okay, thank you. So to consider the long-term care and maintenance, just putting that on my notes list. Okay, good. Thank you so much, Lacey. Tim, did you have a closing thought?
Tim, I just had a quick question.
Oh, sure. Who's that?
Sure, it may have been shared, but the raising part of the roof going to the back east wall, is that incorporating the original windows on that second story?
Yes.
Okay.
Does that work, Ben? Do you have a follow-up or?
No, I was just hoping when we were lowering the wall, I hope that wasn't being taken out. I think that
good.
shows the perspective of what was originally there, and I like tying it in.
Good. Thank you. And Ben, I'm glad you're here. Ben's an important person in this conversation because he handles he's a minister and he handles the facility. So we want to hear what he thinks about all this. Okay. I just don't want to keep people too long. Anybody have anything burning? And then I'm going to ask Burt, how can we best get comments back to you? should I just collect comments and then we just email them to you, or?
Yeah, that works.
Mhm.
You know, again, however you want to feed them to me.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. And then the idea is that we have revised designs for the Juneteenth weekend. That's where we're headed. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you all. And Burt, we cannot thank you enough. It is so inspiring, and it just shows your passion for this, and it's all so meaningful. Thank you so much. Okay, everyone, have a great, you're welcome. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you.